Well, thank you everybody for joining. We're super excited to have you here today to talk about the multipliers training that White Label is now offering to everybody. So Christine, do you want to just get us started?
I would love to. Thanks, Lindsay. So something that we appreciate at White Label is being a learning organization. And during our weekly team meetings, not only do we share success stories that we've encountered throughout the week, but also we have a learning corner where anyone on the team is invited to contribute things that they have learned during the week. It could be, HR compliant, new legal regulations coming out, or a new kind of efficient tip and trick in one of our tech systems that will help make our work more efficient and better for the team. But we really spend a lot of time within that learning corner to help educate everyone. And as we're a learning organization, we live and breathe our own methodology as we try to help our clients understand why it's so important to be a learning organization, and why they should be investing in their human capital to essentially amplify and optimize their organization. We do the same. And so last year, during one of my one-on-ones with the team, I was asking everyone on the team at that point, what they had a passion in and where they would like to grow within White Label. And Lindsay shared that she had a passion around training and appreciated being involved in the trainings up to that point, but she would really like to kind of start to lead that function out for our firm. And I was delighted because I think I prefer to be behind the desk with my glasses on and doing the research, kind of being the nerd. And I can present. And Lindsay has just demonstrated time and time again, she's a phenomenal presenter, so articulate, so well-spoken, but also creates a really safe and empathetic environment where people can feel safe being vulnerable, so that the trainings are much more applicable because we work through these applied learning scenarios during the trainings. And so to that end, we invested in Lindsay to become a Multipliers certified training coach on how the best leaders make everyone smarter. So Lindsay went through that certification process, and we're entirely grateful because we're now able to offer this to our clients as a new product and service. So Lindsay, with that information, and kind of, it would be helpful to hear, your experience and your take on what I just shared. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I will just say, speaking to what Christine said last year when she was, providing us opportunities with where do we want to go and grow within our careers. Part of that entailed with just learning and development. We chose a couple of books that we wanted to read throughout the year to help improve areas that we were interested in. And one of those books that I was given to read was Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. And if you haven't read it yet, highly recommend. It's part of the course, so it's something that we'll be implementing into the course. But transparently, I typically don't love reading business books because I feel like what is said in 200 to 300 pages could be consolidated into about 20 to 30 pages a lot of the time. But reading Multipliers was one of the first times where I felt like I really enjoyed, from beginning to end, what she shared in the book. She gives so many real life examples, and I feel like the concepts that she shares are applicable to everybody. I think that everybody has the intention to be the best leader that they can be. But unfortunately, as everybody in this room probably has experienced, not every leader that they've worked with is the best leader that they could be. There's often a gap between the intent of the leader and the actual impact of the work or the actions that they're doing. And so after reading this book, I was just telling Christine every week, like what I was learning about and why I loved it and why I was so excited and how I couldn't wait to implement this into our trainings. And then we did some research and realized that there actually was a whole training course certification that I could go through and become a more specialized trainer for this topic. And so for the people that I've already delivered this to, it's just really fun to see how much it resonates with people, because there really is something that is applicable to every single person. And it gives really actionable insight into what leaders can do, what changes they can make, even if they're just small, that will help take them from that intended action to get that outcome that they actually want.
Yeah, I love that, Lindsay. Thanks. And, as you were sharing that about your experiences reading the chapters, it just reminded me of a time earlier in my career where I felt really fortunate that an account manager with the insurance broker that we're working with for this group sat me down for about an hour, and she said, I have to tell you this. And it was really great, clear, constructive feedback for me on how I needed to learn how to delegate. And I really felt fortunate in that meeting that she was opening it up to me in the way that she did, and sharing with me something that I needed to hear that really has been pivotal to my career since. And like at that point, I wasn't even a manager. I was managing the HR kind of function for this company, but not managing people yet. And something that we help our clients understand at White Label now is that whether you're a new manager or, entirely new manager, or a new manager coming into an organization with management experience, but you haven't managed at this, company before, that, we've most likely learned management behaviors, approaches, traits from just what we've observed from other managers. Yet they most likely have not had any formal management training. And so if you think about just kind of that perpetual effect of maybe, some accidental diminishing qualities transferring, over to new managers, or just becoming leadership attributes in an organization by naturally happening and not being trained or coached, that can potentially be detrimental. And so it's really funny because I have learned through my accidentally diminishing tendencies. And I've appreciated the Multipliers book, not necessarily, helping me understand that, I'm not intending to do that. And Lindsay, like, what are your thoughts around that? What have you found from the Multipliers coaching on how it's able to help managers who might not be doing well, transition and convert to being a better manager?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to show this kind of bell curve that she provided, and she was doing her research about, interviewing thousands of leaders globally. This wasn't just like a research study that was done in the United States. And it was done with people in every industry, every size of organization, from small to enterprise. And almost every time, it is these well-meaning, decent managers who are just underutilizing their people with the very best of intentions. And so as you can see on this bell curve, you do have people who are operating fully as diminishers kind of on this far left side, or people maybe who are super awesome and they're always operating as multipliers on the far right. But it really is this spectrum of people with, Christine, as you mentioned, this kind of accidental diminishing. And what she means by that accidental diminishing is all about that intention versus the impact. And so what I love about this training is that it is not in any way discouraging. I don't think anybody would read this and feel like I am hopeless. I'm never going to be able to be operating on this right hand of the spectrum. I think that it's very encouraging to see like, okay, well, I'm already having the good intent. Like I'm already halfway there and being able to be a good manager. And I want to be able to utilize my talent and get the most out of my people that I can. And she was seeing in her research just, outstanding, very disparate like outcomes where people who were diminishing were receiving less than 50% of the capability of their employees, whereas the people who were multiplying were getting more than 200% of the capabilities of their employees. And so there really was data to speak to the fact that when you are operating as a multiplier, you don't have to add more headcount to your team. Sometimes you do, but a lot of the time you have the people with the talent to be able to do what you need to do. And so it helps your employees, but it helps you as a manager. And it's very encouraging because it's just small, actionable items that you can implement that will help take you from that less than 50% to that more than 200%.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And it's been really neat for me to see, the team grow, even at White Label, sharing that Kate's been able to move into sales, and Lindsay, you're heading up the talent, business unit for us now. It really is incredible to see what we can achieve together. And I think, oftentimes we do get lost or trapped in the idea that adding people helps solve problems or makes things less complex. And that's not necessarily the case. And if, by way of managers and leading people, if we just learn how to amplify, the genius in each individual, how much more we can really accomplish together.
Yeah.
So, well, I think with like this bell curve demonstration, what I'm fascinated about is, learning more about accidental diminishers. And does it make sense to kind of dive into those, Lindsay?
Yeah, I think that seems like a great next step. So here are the 9 kind of profiles, if you will, of different accidental diminishers. And I'd like to dive into each of them high level, just so that everybody here has a sense of, what they are. And I will say this a million times probably in this training, but it is always about the intent versus the impact. And so I'd like to break down that assumption and what the intent is behind it, but what the actual long-term impact is. And I'd also just like to challenge everybody in this training to try and see themselves. Where are they potentially operating right now? And where is their opportunity for growth or improvement? And while in this webinar, we'll really just do a high level kind of overview of what these different accidental diminishing profiles are, what we do in the actual 10-week training, and it is 10 weeks because the point is that it is a transformative change. It's not just a 1-hour session where hopefully, it sticks, but we have action items that we work on, between sessions, even where leaders can really hone in on these to understand what they need to do to stop these diminishing tendencies and get the actual outcome that they're looking for. So I'll just do a little overview of each of the profiles, and then we have time for questions at the end. So feel free to write them down so that we can talk about it after. So jumping in, we'll start out with the always on. So I'm just going to minimize this. The always on is a manager who's constantly engaged, present, energetic, contributing, always has something to say. I feel like initially it's like, well, why would this be a bad thing? This seems like something that you would really want in a manager, somebody who's engaged and always contributing, and you feel like, they're always there for support. And that assumption from the manager is that, you know, the more that they share, the more that the people that they lead will understand what needs to be done. They have this intention to create this energy, and it's going to be infectious, and it's going to impact everybody on the team. But what they don't realize that long-term consequence is going to be is that if they're the one who is always on, they're consuming all of the space in the room, and they're not leaving room for the people on their team to be on, to share their feedback and their input. And so eventually people will start to tune them out, or they'll start to tune themselves down because they know, you know, it doesn't even matter what I contribute. My manager is probably going to steal the show, for lack of a better word. And then we have the rescuer. So the rescuer is a caring manager who doesn't like to see people struggle or fail. At this first sign of a problem, they'll jump in and they'll help. I think speaking for personal, like from personal experience, I like having a rescuer for a manager in a sense that it makes me feel safe. But I will say it does not cause me to challenge or stretch myself in any way, because I feel like I always have that safety net. And so the unintended consequence with that is that people become dependent on their manager as they fail to learn and grow. I'll say something that I've really enjoyed working with Christine is that she's not afraid to challenge me or anybody else, or to give us opportunities to grow or stretch. And I will say she does always have our back, so it's not like there's no safety net that's there. But you know, I don't have to go, you know, I think initially when I started working, I didn't have as much experience with a multiplying manager. And so I feel like I was very reliant on going to Christine every single time I had any type of question or concern. And she's been able to help teach me that, you know, I got this, I can do this, I can challenge and stretch myself. And in a pinch, of course, she will be there for me. But it really has given me, you know, there's been failures along the way, but most failures are never permanent. And so it's been a really great opportunity for me. I feel like, you know, in 2.5 years, I've gained 10 years of experience through that. And so that's something that I'm really grateful for, speaking like from a personal perspective. And then the pace setters are achievers who envision their team as capable of more. So they personally set high performance standards to build momentum. You know, they realize that their team is watching them. And, you know, I think Christine spoke to this as well. A lot of the time, we learn management styles through watching and observing. But unfortunately, sometimes when there is somebody who's always pushing more and more and more, the unintended consequence is that your employees don't end up following. They just often become spectators, and they don't roll up their sleeves and do the work. They let you roll up your sleeves and do the work, and then they become observers. Again, you're not getting the output or the talent from them, because they're just assuming that you as the manager are going to make sure that it's taken care of and doesn't require any output from them. And kind of going back to what we said before, adding more headcount or anything is not going to resolve that. It's just going to add more to your plate as a manager, and your team will continue to stand by and watch. And so it just adds to that gap in talent. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt somebody? Okay. The rapid responder is a manager who wants to run an agile organization, keep things moving fast. So they are rapidly responding, making quick decisions. They want to keep things moving really quickly. And so unfortunately, the unintended consequence is that it's only this leader who's moving fast. Other people slow down because they know, again, that their manager is going to be the one who takes care of it. Or they're feeling overload or a traffic jam of decisions and actions. And so it's kind of is comparable to that always on, where the manager is taking up a lot of space and they're not providing opportunities for their employees to respond and to be participants. It in turn makes them more of spectators rather than somebody who's actively participating. Are there any questions to this point? Because I know there's a lot of profiles that we're going to cover. And so, you know, if there's anybody that has any questions to this point, then I'd be happy to take a little breather and field any questions about these, or we can save them till the end.
I think also if anyone, in the accidental diminishing kind of profiles that have been shared thus far, can relate to any of those, could be really interesting to hear, about your experience with them, and is the positive intent and the unintended consequence what you experienced with it. So I know, go ahead, James.
About the rescuer, that is something I can relate to. You're quite right, Lindsay, when you say that the intent is to help someone when you feel that they're struggling. The impact, though, as you alluded to, is that oftentimes the person you think you're helping will feel that they're being treated almost as an infant. And that really creates a whole other series of consequences within the organization and the relationship I might have with that person. So it's a very important one that you're raising, and I think you explained it very well, at least for me. And I lived it, and I suffered from it. So thank you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think many can relate. Okay, awesome. Well, if nobody has anything else, then we can keep moving forward. But I'll give another opportunity to kind of share experiences, as Christine mentioned, or, if anybody's felt this or seen this, then I think the group could benefit from hearing from it if you feel comfortable sharing. So the idea fountain is somebody who constantly generates and shares a wealth of ideas to stimulate other people around them. Christine actually has an example that she shared in the past, working for an organization for a leader who, unfortunately, I feel like was not very present in the organization, but every time they did decide to come around, they wanted to mix things up or change everything that the organization was working on or going through. So Christine, do you want to share a little bit about that for this group?
Sure. And it's so funny, I guess, how it works out, because I feel like I can be the idea fountain too. And I do raise my hand and say, this is the idea fountain, like coming out of me to the team, so they can help me organize it and we can put it into a system and a process. But it was really interesting working for a past CEO who truly was an idea fountain, and, would be out, in business meetings, sales calls, different things for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, and entirely disengaged from company operations, and then come back, and it was this whirlwind, this Tasmanian devil of what this happened. No, we're not doing that. We're changing everything up. And during those 2 to 3 weeks while they were out, team was getting things organized and structured so that they could execute on direction. And it was the unintended consequence there was, truly people were becoming overwhelmed with it, or shutting down or just kind of giving up. And what was interesting about this organization was that it also paid, and almost in some ways overpaid for, the role specific to the market. And what ended up happening with that idea fountain as a leader, and then these really high base comp rates to the market, so that people just checked out, but they didn't leave because they couldn't leave and make the same money somewhere else. So the organization really stalled out, because if you have people that are overpaid, checking out from their job, not leaving, but feeling totally overwhelmed and disengaging from the work because there's nothing that they can do, it really impeded, the organization as a whole, after a few really iterations and cycles of it. So just interesting to see how that, management style paired with a total rewards kind of philosophy can have a greater impact on the broader organization.
Yeah, and it's interesting because with this idea fountain, the intent is to stimulate the ideas, right? It's like exciting. There's new opportunities, there's new avenues that we can chase. But when that is a fountain and constantly happening, then the outcome is exactly like Christine said. People are checked out and they're not necessarily leaving. So then you have this organization, and it kind of stems back to that getting less than 50% of output from the people that are on staff. So you have the head count, but you don't have the people who are actioning any of these ideas because it's too many. And so I think that there's a fine balance between, of course, you want to have new ideas and be creative and find creative opportunities to succeed. But what's the balance between, not being a fountain where it's just like constant, and you can keep the team stimulated and engaged and not overwhelmed and checked out. So thanks for sharing that. I think it's very applicable.
Of course.
The optimist is managers who believe most problems can be tackled with hard work and the right mindset. So I think that the optimist is a great person to work for, and you want to feel like empowered or happy or feel like the future is very bright. But unfortunately, a lot of the time that unintended consequence is that there's a disconnect between the leader's perception and the perception of the people doing the work. If your employees are feeling like they are bogged down or they feel lost, they're not sure where to go, where to start, like that can be a very challenging thing to go through as an individual, and to feel like you couldn't go to your manager and share those concerns or, brainstorm ideas is very, first of all, invalidating that your concerns are not, relevant, or maybe it's something that's just wrong with you as an individual rather than an actual problem that needs to be solved. And so it leads to this discouragement. And again, the overarching theme every single time is that you're getting way less output of your employees than they are capable of providing, rather than if this manager had, validating the concerns. Of course, it's healthy to have a level of optimism within that, but making sure that those concerns are validated and then brainstorming together on solutions of how to resolve those issues. And then we have the protector, which, is relevant in business and in every aspect of life. You have mama bears protecting their staff, shielding their people from the hazards of corporate life. This assumption that people need the protection, you have to keep them safe. And I think, James, this kind of speaks to your comment earlier, relevant to the rescuer, unintended consequence. People don't learn to fend for themselves, but they also may start to resent you, feeling like you are treating them like an infant, or that they are incapable of going through these things that are going to allow them to stretch and grow and become better in their careers. I think that every single person could relate to challenges make us grow and stretch. And so if your manager is not willing to allow you to have those opportunities, then they're really doing you a disservice in growing in your career. And then we have the strategist. So somebody who's a big thinker, casts a compelling vision of the future, but they assume that people need them to make the vision a reality, and that they have to create this compelling reason to go beyond the status quo. And so you get people who really rely on their manager for that. They're deferring up. They are not finding the answers. They're just, my boss will figure it out. And so something that I love about the Multipliers training that she says a lot is that managers need to have the assumption that people are smart and can figure it out, and you hired them for a reason. And so part of the Multipliers training is going through and finding what everybody's native genius is. So you can really utilize that genius to help understand how they can help the organization succeed, and involving everybody in the strategy, because people have different perceptions and outlooks of the business. And so if the leader's taking on all of those things themselves, then they're really missing out on an opportunity to get that outlook and perspective from the people who are on their team, and utilizing them to do the job that they hired them to do. And then finally, we have the perfectionist. So these are the managers who appreciate excellence, that love getting something perfect, perfection is always the goal. And, who's not going to be happy of a job well done when you have this perfectly presented project. But often this results in people feeling criticized, feeling disheartened. They stop trying because, they're never going to quite reach that level that's going to be good enough for their manager. And so again, it's finding this balance between how do you motivate your employees to provide work that they can be proud of and that the firm can be proud of, while also understanding that failure is part of the process and that there's going to be multiple iterations and that it's a learning process as you go, because you don't want this result and people just becoming disheartened and they stop trying. So those are our 9 accidental diminishing tendencies. Just like we did before, as we kind of went through the first 4 and now the second 5, does anybody have any experiences that they'd like to share about going through something like this and then feeling like the outcome, or maybe they had a different outcome and they can't really relate? I think that would be interesting to hear as well.
I feel like I am parts of all of them. I should open my window and probably jump out.
No.
No, this is I love what I've seen so far, and I wonder, have you noticed have you noticed that there might be specific industries or types of companies that tend to cultivate or spawn these kinds of behaviors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I've seen it in every industry that I've been in so far. We have clients in a wide array of industry. And I think everybody that I've presented this so far has resonated the same as what you've said of like, wow, I see this a lot in myself. So I think that there may be industries where people feel like this applies more. But from my perspective and what I've seen, I think that it seems to be applicable to all. And that also was something that Liz Wiseman said in the research that she had done, is that, they interviewed people from every single industry, every single size of organization, and really felt that this was consistent across their research. Yeah, great question though. Speaking to this slide and the ripple effect, it was just interesting as, we were kind of preparing for this webinar today. Christine and I were discussing, first of all, the experience that she shared at the beginning about being pulled in by the account manager and given some constructive coaching about how she could be a little bit better in her multiplying effect. And I think that it's just been interesting for me, having worked for Christine over the last 2.5 years, like I mentioned before. It's been amazing for me to work for her because she is such a multiplying leader. Every single time that I'm doing these trainings, I'm always using examples working with her as somebody who has multiplied me rather than the opposite, because unfortunately, like everybody, I've had experience working for diminishers as well. And so it really is just a ripple effect, because that individual who gave Christine that constructive criticism impacted her to now she's leading white label advisors. And, there's 10 of us on the team that are benefiting from this multiplying leadership that she's been providing to us. And as we go on in our careers, we'll be able to implement that in our leadership styles as well. And, we implement it in our trainings with our clients. And so our clients, it's like this big web effect of the people that they're managing. And so, Liz Wiseman's goal in creating this training is, she said she wants to change the world by changing the behavior of one bad manager at a time, because effectively that is really changing the world. It impacts, your job impacts so much of what you do on a day-to-day basis. And there's so many hard things that people go through in life as is. They don't need that extra weight that can come from a bad relationship with a manager who's just not utilizing the talent to the best that they could. And so there really are large effects that come from this training. And so that's why I mentioned, as before, this is a 10-week training because the goal is for transformative change. It's not just kind of like a one and done conversation, but it's really introspective and reflective. And there's a whole participant kit that every individual gets when they go through the program that gives them the book so that they have the resources directly from Liz. But there's also a journal that we use in every single training that we'll take time to reflect on our experiences, what we have done, what we have experienced, what we would like to do. The conversation is very discussion based, so you have the opportunity to learn from other people who are participating in the training as well. And it's just doing a really deep dive into those small actionable items that you can make that will take you from that unintended consequence to what you actually are trying to achieve by getting the talent out of your employees. So Christine, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, absolutely. This is kind of more of a tactical way of sharing it, and I'll read what the slide says and then kind of maybe make it a little more, I guess, human-centered. But with White Label, we really believe that the corporate talent development programming supports people leaders with systematic and proactive performance management, ensuring phenomenal communication feedback loops, eliminating legal liability, unnecessary attrition, and improving productivity and quality outputs. And one of our really simple ways of measuring employee engagement, which we talk about, is productivity stated in non-financial terms, is how the relationship that an employee has with their manager, and how gauging the employee's happiness. How happy is that employee with their manager? And then fulfillment, opportunities from the team or from the organization, and then being physically and psychologically safe. But what this does is, it was really neat for White Label to kind of look back and reflect on last year and put together, a list of how much value we are helping create in organizations, or costs that we're saving organizations. And we've conservatively estimated that for managers that do work through corporate talent development programs that are supporting them with team productivity, supporting individuals, helping create fulfillment, and by doing all of that, eliminating some of these legal liabilities and unnecessary attrition that can occur, that cost conservatively, the value that's being brought to the organization is $100,000 per manager. And if you think about companies that you're working with, or internally at your organization, how many managers are there? And if you could effectively glean an extra $100,000 out of each manager, just by way of providing them with the right tools, in a learning kind of format, how much that would support the balance sheet of that organization, and what that kind of amplifying or exponential effect would be on the organization and those teams. And even if it's just from this improving productivity and quality outputs, what that could do for a group, especially during this year where markets are even more unstable, companies are refining margins and cutting costs. I would probably say doubling or tripling down on that again, what that could really do for a group. So just trying to put some numbers around it, because I think that helps move these qualitative aspects that we've talked about into something that's really quantifiable and just as impactful.
Thank you. So does anybody have any questions about the content that's been shared today, or about the training in general? Really anything that might have come to mind today. We would love to hear about it.
Is this mostly for upper management training, or is this for, because I've been talking with Christine a little bit over while we've been having the meeting. I've got an HR coordinator that's kind of developing right now that I don't know if this would be something that's too high in focus for her, or something better to start her out with that has a little less meat to it, or what?
Yeah, great question. We've found that this is helpful for anybody who's a people leader at any level. So that could be a team lead who has 1 to however many direct reports, all the way up to an executive leadership team. I think that having somebody do this early in their career, going back to that ripple effect, could be really beneficial, because they're starting out their career with the knowledge that they need to be a really great manager, rather than learning through trial and error. So it really is applicable at all levels, I would say.
And Kevin, that's a great question for that position specifically, because sometimes in HR professionals are a team of 1 or 2. And so it might not seem like there's such a need for, an HR professional to have leadership training. But if we think about just their sphere of influence to other managers and leaders, at White Label, we talk about this with our client services team, like you are helping lead leaders. And so any level of kind of leadership development that professionals who might not have large teams themselves, but do have this sphere of influence to other leaders in the organization, I think is really, really helpful. Again, kind of driving that modeling and reciprocation, and adopting leadership styles, as well as, I think some of the things learned in this training are just good for collaboration and communication. And, generally, we're not seeing a lot of collaboration training that organizations bring in that's highly impactful. And even when we get into like some pretty intense HR investigations, most often the core or the root causes come down to communication and context. And so, by individuals having training around how to be good leaders, how to collaborate, how to communicate effectively, I think that's all very, very helpful.
So this question is for Christine or Lindsay. Is this training offered both individually and to groups?
Yeah, great question. It could be offered individually. We do have it set up for groups of up to 10 people. Okay. Because it is supposed to be very, like I said, discussion based. There's thought-provoking questions, a lot of introspection and reflection. And so we have done it in group settings in the past. But I've also broken it down and done it one-on-one with some individuals, and it's still been productive. There are challenges, if you will, in the journal to go and get feedback from people who are in your kind of sphere of influence. And so that can be done on an individual level as well.
Because I do see the wisdom of the group approach, but I understand that sometimes to customize it to an individual is useful. Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I have 2 questions. One is kind of bouncing off of James's question, and that would be, if people join the training with you, will they be just within their group of people that they know or within their company, or will they be joining with other companies and sort of like networking in that way? And in addition, can you discuss costs a little bit for individual or group?
Yeah, great questions. Thank you, Stephanie. I'll speak to the first one, and then I'll turn the time over to Christine for the second one as far as cost and pricing. So for the first one, we are offering it multiple ways. So we have offered this to our clients for their management team to go through as a group. And so in that effect, they would be doing it with people that they already know, people that they're working with on a close basis. And I think that there is value to that, because you're able to provide feedback to people that you see how they're working and maybe what some of their blind spots are. And, there's good conversation that can stem from that. But White Label is also offering a cohort a couple of times a year where it will be people from different organizations, different industries. So there will be opportunities for networking in that way to kind of expand, meet new people. I think that also will provide its own unique spin to it because nobody else really knows you and can speak to your, your management style. It allows a level of vulnerability, I think. But still, like I mentioned before, there are different like challenges to do throughout the training where you will go to the people who are in your sphere of influence to kind of get feedback from them.
Thanks, Lindsay and Stephanie. And so I believe my answer to this question is on pricing, right? Okay, just want to make sure I'm following. So with pricing, it's $1,500 per participant for the entire course, and that provides kind of that multipliers package that Lindsay was talking about with the book, the journal, and then some kind of ancillary learning materials as well. We like to laugh about that because when Lindsay was essentially providing multipliers coaching to our team, Ashley had just started and we had all received our packages from the Wiseman group, and Ashley's had been intercepted at some point in the mailing process, and she had a lot of really interesting things in hers, nothing bad or unsafe, but just it's a good laugh. But what we've talked about to ensure that that does not potentially go out to our clients or individuals interested in the training is we'll receive all of them, check to make sure that they're okay before we send them out. So it's high quality all the way around, but it is $1,500 per participant for the 10 weeks. So, yeah.
And is this, is it a webinar then for the full 10 weeks, or is it an on-site training somewhere?
Yeah, great question. We have turned into a fully remote team, and Lindsay and some of the other team members reside in Las Vegas. So we've kind of had this nice Salt Lake hub now and this nice Las Vegas hub. And since Lindsay's presenting out of Las Vegas, it is entirely virtual, but we can run it all through Zoom. So, yeah. Yeah.
Lindsay, I have a question. So since the course only accommodates a specific number of participants, so I'm wondering when will be the next cohort begins? Like, when are you going to take in enlistments for another batch of participants?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our next cohort, we have signups happening right now for it to start in May. So that will be like our next group of a cohort that's starting that's not part of like a certain organization. And Amy will be sending out an email with information about that afterwards, after we finish the training. And then also that will include my email in it as well. So if there's any questions that come up after this webinar that maybe you didn't think of until later, or you just like to get a little bit more information that's personalized to you or your group, then you'll have my email address, and I'll be happy to set up a time to have more of a one-on-one conversation.
I have a follow-up question. What's the process to get people signed up? I have a client that is interested in the program. Yeah,
thanks for asking. So we have like a sign up group that will go out. It depends on if they want to sign up for the cohort or if like a management group at an organization is interested. So if we, if you have a group and they want 10 or less of their managers to go through this training, then we'd have them reach out to Kate Walker on our team, who's our business development coordinator, and she can help provide information and logistics around that. If it's more individual based and they're wanting to sign up for that cohort, then we have a sign up that we can send to those individuals, and then we'll send them, as Christine said, all of the materials, and they'll be quality control checked beforehand, so people aren't getting random coupons to things. And then yeah, we'll send them the calendar with the Zoom links and everything as well. Awesome. Well, we do have two members of our team who went through this training, as Christine said. last year we did do this as a group. And so at the time, we had an individual who was not a manager yet, but has now become a manager. And then we had another individual who had some management experience and then has continued with their management experience. So we kind of wanted to turn the time over to each of them for just a minute to kind of share their experience and how they feel that this helped them prepare for becoming a manager, and also how it kind of helped shift their perspective as a manager. So Ashley and Kate, I'll turn it over to you two.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley. Nice to meet you. I am the one who got all the weird coupons and soap bars and whatever else was in my multipliers package. But it's funny because it was like within my first month or two, and I thought it was some sort of like hazing thing, like, oh, welcome to the team. But it wasn't. And I actually had a very great experience with multipliers. I have been a manager for quite a while in my previous jobs, and this is something that I wish I had from day one. But with all of the tendencies, the accidental diminishers, I find myself relating to all of them, but two of them in particular, I felt I really focused on during this training was the rescuer and the always on. I tend to not let my team fail at any capacity. I don't want them to. And so I am very quick to rescue. I'll jump in, I'll do a project for them, whatever that needs be. But and then with being always on, I'm one of those people where if no one's talking in the meeting, I feel like I have to share an idea just because I don't want anyone to feel awkward. I always have ideas and I always want everyone to hear them. And I've definitely been able to take a step back. And in doing so, you know, we hired a lot of new people at the end of the year last year and coming into this year. And my management style has totally changed. And I've been able to take a step back and not try to always be the first person to speak in meetings. Even if I have a thought and I want to share it, I'll kind of force myself to stay silent a little bit. And I've seen my team's talent shine through because I give them the space to talk and I give them the space to make mistakes, and then I can help them. And I think we learn best by making mistakes. And so if no one's ever able to fail, then they're not ever going to be the experts at anything. So this multipliers training, and I've implemented it in my parenting too. I have two kids, 2 and 1, and I've implemented it with my husband, like my friends, everyone. I've just talked about it with everyone. So it's been really great.
Thanks, Ashley. Who knew that all these positive skills and attributes would also be very being effective on teams? Because when I went through this multipliers, I was like, why are these bad things? These are great to have in leadership and skills. But like Lindsay and Christine have mentioned, they are diminishers, and it's good leaders often come from good intentions, but great leaders are from those with that multiplier team. And while I was looking back and listening to some of Christine's and your guys' stories of bad managers, or I'm sure we all have a story of a leader that either mentored us for the good, or we're like, we're never going to be that type of leader because of how they treated their team. So going through this 10-week course and doing those deep dives, it really showed a light to me of the type of leader that I want to be. It motivated me and encouraged me and really wanted me to become something better, because I was never a leader to a team. I worked well and along with leaders, but I never had one for my own. But I often had people come to me of either their leadership styles or the things that they were doing wrong. And I just took from that of, I'm never going to do that. But in a long time, even though you take those bad skills, or you unintentionally create these diminishing qualities. And so now that I have become a leader, I am more self-aware. I want to multiply my team and understand the effect it does on an organization as well. I came from a company before coming from White Label, from a company that didn't take care of their leaders and show them the great qualities that they can. And you see the loss of potential of that company that they had, and how they're not going as far to what their competitors could be, and their efficiency is lacking because of the leadership there. So while I was doing research on myself and being more self-aware, I found a quote from John Quincy Adams that said, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader." And that's what I really think Multipliers is making actions for other people to become leaders, and you're multiplying to have that ripple effect.
Thank you both. I just want to thank you all for coming today, for taking the time. I know everybody is really busy and there's a lot to do. So I appreciate everybody taking the time out of their schedules to be here today. And as mentioned before, Amy will be sending a follow-up email to this that will have my email address in it. So if you have any questions or concerns or want to talk about how this could apply to you or your team, then I encourage you to reach out and we can set up a time to discuss. But otherwise, I really appreciate the time, and we're right at 12 o'clock. So that's all we have today.